Our name is Ghost, want you dead. As the night continues to overtake the day, and the veil between the world of the living and the world of the dead approaches its finish, we can feel spirits in the air around us. They whisper on the wind, almost as if they have something to tell us. Hello, I'm Matthew.
And I'm Rebecca. Earlier in the week, I thought about how I thought of something and I didn't make a note of it, I guess, but I wanted to surprise you and be like, Matthew, I have a question for you because I believe several of ours have begun that way. And I was going to ask you a question and I don't remember what it was because, yeah, but let's just jump in.
Episode 31, Victoria Winters, reminds us that Collinwood is tense and
And spooky.
also creepy. Also, David is going to explode or something.
He certainly is.
We rejoin immediately after Burke has magically produced the missing brake valve from his pocket. And
And Roger wants to know where he got the part. And then David tries to flee, and Roger snatches him up by the shirt collar, which I thought that was fun. And he's like, "No, you're not getting away, you little rascal."
Roger demands Burke tell him where he got the valve. Then opening credits. Back from the credits, Burke lies and suggests that David tell his father where they found the valve. But Roger wants to hear it from Burke. So Burke says that he and David just happened to find the valve on the road where the accident happened. Roger sends David and Burke out into the foyer where uh, before that, David immediately agrees to the lie. He's like, "Oh yeah, that
Yep,
sure
totally.
did happen. It
Yep.
was that.
Yes, mister.
Yeah." Back in the foyer, back in the drawing room, once David and Burke have been sent out to detention in the hallway, Roger asks Vicky if she believes this story, but as with most things, she just doesn't know.
She sure doesn't know much.
Roger confirms with Vicky, "Is this the valve that you saw in David's bedroom?" And she agrees that it is.
She does know that.
Back out in the foyer, Burke is still making nice with David and enlisting him to his side, so he asks David if he thinks that Roger believed them. David doesn't know, but asks why Burke lied, and Burke jokes that it's an old habit, and he's sympathizing with Roger being such a jerk to David.
And
And
generally is teaching David how to be a little snake too and
but
having a
also
bonding moment.
also being like, "You owe me, kid." Because he's saying like, "I may have just
As
saved your bacon."
yeah.
And he tries to get David to admit guilt for the tampering, but David is still denying it. So Burke finally just tells him, "Look, I saw you plant the brake valve in the sofa." So David gives up and he's like, "Yeah, I should have just thrown it away. And yes, I was trying to frame you, but I didn't know that you were cool at that point." And
Right.
so Burke is like, "Oh, no hard feelings, kid. We're friends now. Seems like a sensible thing for you to have done." But he does kind of scold him a little bit about attempting murder, but not all that much.
Yeah, not as much as you would think. They are, like I said, bonding over kind of being a little bit shady together, and like Brooke's almost a little proud of him, like, good job, buddy.
Similar to how Roger kind of was proud for the.
Yes.
It's funny.
Like,
Back in the drawing room, Roger is scolding Vicky for losing track of the valve in the first place.
he likes to scold Vicky for existing.
Everybody does. Vicky can't do nothing right. Everybody's always mad at
She
her.
just don't know.
Well, Vicky suggests that David could have planted the valve in the road after he stole it back from her dresser. The phone rings and Roger answers to find Carolyn asking if David got home, and she lets Roger know that David was at the hotel with Burke, which is contrary to the story that Burke told. Burke says he just found David wandering the street. In the foyer, David is coming back downstairs with a photo of his mother to show Burke. David is sad and wishing his mother was there to prevent Roger from being so mean. And Roger's really so very mean to him, and that's the only reason he tried to kill him. David also reveals that he hates Vicky. Burke tries to dissuade him, but David vows to get revenge on her.
Not so much dissuade him in hating his father, but as toward hating Vicky.
Yeah, and at that moment, Roger and Vicky emerge from the drawing room, and Roger summons Burke into the drawing room while sending Vicky and David upstairs.
And he jokes that it's his turn to go get bitched out, essentially. Like,
well, it
my
is.
turn in the principal's office kind of vibes.
As David and Vicky are going upstairs, Burke calls up to David that he'll always be there if he needs a friend. In the drawing room, Burke at first denies that David was at the hotel. Upstairs, David looks dramatically out a window, not as good as Liz, but better than Carolyn at the dramatic window gazing.
Yes, he's got one up on her for that.
Vicky tries to talk to him, but he just tells her to leave him alone and that he wishes she had never come to Collinwood and that he hates her.
I believe he repeats that because, he likes to repeat things.
And downstairs, Burke revises his story to say that, oh, they did go to the hotel to try and wait out the storm. Roger calls Burke and David rotten liars. Burke says he did lie, but only because he didn't want to get David into any more trouble. That David had come to him with a sob story about how everyone was against him and Roger was so very mean. So Burke lied about him being at the hotel to avoid any more trouble for him.
Which I'll also note, again, a difference between the 1960s and now is that they're saying like, oh yeah, we were alone in my hotel room for an hour. And like in today's world, we would be like, well, what the fuck was going on? Fucking creep. Why you got this kid in your room? And that would be really fucking creepy now. But in the 60s, it was like, oh, that's fine. You picked up this random child and took him back to your hotel. No worries.
Well, there's an added element to that which comes up later that we might revisit this then. Burke says maybe David came to the hotel because he just wanted to see what Burke looked like after Roger and his wife talked about him so much. Roger tells Burke to stay away from David and they fight some more. Burke gets real close and calls Roger out for being pissed off that he can't send Burke back to jail. Upstairs, David is continuing to be a little shit and telling Vicky that she wants him dead. He then says, well, he wants her dead. Roger cuts him off as he details how he wants 1,000 ghosts to strangle her. But Rebecca, I would like to know what it says in your notes about that.
So this was not a typo so much as I was voice to texting it and verbally said, because my mouth doesn't work, I hope 1,000 goats would come in here and strangle. I would like to be strangled by 1,000 goats with hugs.
Sounds like an okay way to go.
Yep.
Well, Roger sends Vicky out and David asks him what he's going to do. Down in the drawing room, Burke is playing chopsticks on the piano
Whimsically.
until Vicky enters and he asks if she wants to join him in a four-hand duet. She declines. She's worried about David. Burke says, oh, Roger won't hurt him. He'll just yell at him a little bit. He does tell her that she should be worried, calls her a little governess again and tells her that David has a grudge against her and is out for revenge and she should leave.
And avoid open windows. He says this now and again later quite a bit.
And I forget exactly what he says, but he flirts with her and Rebecca swooned on the couch. She got the vapors at something that Burke said. What was
It
it?
was just kind of the way he was looking at her too. But like, I was like, she asks why he gives a crap. Like, why do you care about me and my little governessness? He says very dreamily, because I'm a man of impulse, or maybe because I'm a man of impulse. And then kind of shot her this look, and I was like, whew. Dr. Birkeland. Dr. Birkeland.
Even now, she's all tongue-tied
I
and
know.
twitter-pated.
I can't even think about it without getting flustered.
An
Anyway,
emerging
and then he
theme
says,
of this podcast is that Becca needs to get some. She's way
I
too
have a note
sexually
about.
invested in most of the characters on this show.
Well, I've added a new one to the list we might have to fight about later, but I'll detail that later. But yes, the moral of this podcast is that Becca needs a date. So he says, because I'm a man of impulse. I'm like, I bet you are, Dr. Burke Dublin.
And also because of them titties or something. He makes it somehow personal
No,
to
he just
her.
says, because I think I like you. And then it's sweet.
Yeah.
Like, he's sort of vulnerable there too for a minute. Kind of sleazy guy, but in a fun way.
Well, anyway, he tries to tell her she really ought to go back to New York, and she says that she cannot leave without getting answers about her past. Makes a cute joke about knowing that he had a private investigator looking into her. He offers to show her the report if she'll have dinner with him, and at first she declines. Back upstairs, Roger is shaking horrible little David again, like he likes to do.
He says, you're a little murderer. You're a rotten, lying little murderer, and that's what you are, and you're going to get what you deserve.
And David denies it, but Roger's like, no, we're going to send you away. And David flees downstairs into the waiting arms of Burke for protection. Roger snatches him back and says he's going to lock him up in his room while he decides what to do with him.
Burke, you're my new daddy now.
And while they're upstairs, Vicky calls Burke out for not really taking any of this seriously enough. He's treating it all like a laughing matter. He responds by repeating his dinner invite and reminding her again to stay away from open windows. Then he leaves, and Vicky lingers in the foyer, leaning on the table, looking scared. End credits.
Episode 32. Victoria Winters says it's quiet in Collinwood, but that there is an unending chill of fear, and that while it's calm now, it's gonna get spooky and weird later, which is also what I say to my dates.
Roger comes slowly down the stairs as Liz enters to say that Matthew is off looking for David. Roger tells her that no, David's here and is locked up in his room, and also he tried to kill me. Liz is pissed that David is locked up in his room, and Roger is like, well, that's what I said, Liz.
I thought that maybe he is sampling some real brandy on the set and not just tea, because it is the 1960s, so I wonder, could have an influence on the flood lines. Like, maybe everybody's just sloshed on dark shadows.
It's not like they seem to care.
Yeah.
As long as they get the gist of it, that's good enough. Roger is irritated with Liz and asks why, when they spoke earlier, she didn't tell him that Vicky had found the valve in David's room. They go over the events again. Liz insists that there's just no way David could be responsible. Then Roger produces the valve and explains again what had happened.
Over at Sheriff's office, he makes a phone call down to somebody and is wanting to call Malloy, but then Malloy just shows up, which is handy and convenient. He asks him about information about the Collinses, and Malloy goes on about how Burke must have done it, and it's got to be Burke, and it's Burke. Sheriff eventually gets to the point, although he does seem to be reluctant and hemming and hawing, that he wants information specifically about David.
Back at Collinwood, Roger interrupts Liz staring dramatically out the window and calls David a monster who has been nothing but trouble since the day he was born. Roger says he's not sure that David is even his son. He suggests that Burke might actually be David's father and confirms that's why he's always hated David. Liz insists that no, Roger, you are the baby daddy, like we're on Maury. But this is what I was hinting at earlier when you were talking about Roger not reacting enough to a strange man being alone in a hotel room with his 9-year-old son. I thought, like, maybe it's just an unspoken thing between them that they don't really know who David's father actually is.
Sure.
So maybe he's less creeped out by them being alone in a hotel knowing, well, that might be his real dad.
That's true. And I mean, they are bonding as though that is the setup. And I mean, that is something that I have somewhat suspected from that point on, although I had the suspicion a little bit, but then I think we watched an episode ahead where you had then revealed that it is never confirmed that it's Burke specifically. But I mean, I think that
Yeah,
the question alone kind of leads that.
We had this scene, and then there's another scene somewhere in, I think, the 120s where Burke gives a similar speech about how, like, well, you know, I was with David's mom right before Roger, and I always kind of wondered if it might actually be my baby. So they both get their little speeches about that, but they don't discuss it together, and it's never brought up again, at least up until like wherever I left off somewhere in the 300s.
Right. Well, and I'll also say that you were making jokes about him kind of grooming David, which to me, on one hand, could be suspicious, not in a sexual nature, but in I'm trying to get this kid on my side because I'm trying to fuck up the Collinses.
Exactly. That's what I meant. I didn't necessarily mean sexually grooming.
No,
I
I
just
know
meant
that
everybody is trying to manipulate this creepy little boy.
Sure, I knew that. I was just clarifying. That could have been his motivation, but he does seem to take a particular shine to David, and that could have been the influence there as well. It's like, oh, this weird little child might be my weird little child, and he's a snake like me.
Indeed. Well, back at Glass's office, Malloy says that he had previously heard David say that he hopes Roger dies, which sounds pretty dramatic, but I don't know about you, but whenever I got into any sort of family fight with anyone, I would be like, I hope you die.
No, but,
we said that all the time.
The Lord would not allow it, and I would be Baptist guilted if I ever such uttered any ill will toward anyone. So,
well, in our household, wishes of death were not uncommon in arguments, so maybe it's not as dramatic as it seems.
Sure.
Glasses isn't sure, and he asks if Bill, that's Malloy, by the way. I don't know why I've suddenly started calling him Bill, but
that's my new cat's name.
Oh yes, well,
that might be
maybe
why.
Maybe that's why. But anyway, Bill thinks that David might actually hate Roger. Or Glasses asks if Bill thinks that David might actually hate Roger. He asks about the general vibe of the father-son relationship. Bill reveals that Roger has threatened to send David away.
And Bill says, well, he doesn't like him. And I just thought it was a great understatement. Like when he's asking if David really hates his father, he's like, well, he doesn't like him. And that just tickled me for some reason. But yes,
well, no one likes Roger, especially Bill.
Yeah.
So he's kind of on the kid's side.
Yeah, like, well, nobody likes Roger.
Bill reveals that Roger has threatened to send David away, and then kind of catches on to what the sheriff, Glasses sheriff, is onto, and he says, oh no, David wouldn't try and kill Roger, they just don't get along.
You can add Sherry to that list instead of Sheriff, because that's what my notes say.
That's funny.
Sherry. Okay. And then the sheriff tells Malloy he saw David knock the wrench off when he was over there and then pick it up. Sherry Glasses says that Burke is too smart to have done it the way that things were done, and he doesn't believe that it was Burke, and that really only leaves David. And then there is some science talk about fingerprints and the overlay, and
Sheriff Constable Glasses Sheriff shows Bill, like, here are the fingerprints, and David's fingerprints are under Burke's fingerprints.
Yeah.
So David touched it first when he left it in the car, then Burke touched it, then we can see over here where David touched it again to try and get out of the whole thing. Glasses admits that this isn't enough evidence for a conviction or anything, but it is enough to raise the suspicion.
Malloy isn't really sure about any of this.
He asks what the sheriff intends to do about it, and like Vicky, he just doesn't know.
Back at Collinwood, Liz is upset that David won't talk to her.
She comes in to find Roger draped over the piano drinking, and I just thought that was cute.
Yes. He is talking about needing to send him away and that he needs special help and that he's a troubled boy and he wants to send him to an institution.
Liz is not into that idea and suggests, how about if we just cover the whole thing up and let him stay here like nothing happened?
And he's like, he tried to kill me, Liz. Kill me. And you still want him here? And I felt like Liz was probably thinking, well, I kind of want to kill you too sometimes. Have you met you?
And Roger is like, well, what about when he tries the next time? And Liz goes on to blame Roger's shitty parenting for David being a murderous little shit, which, fair.
Yeah, I mean, if your bastard who has been treated like a horrible little bastard, you're gonna grow up to be a little bastard.
And Liz goes a little too far and brings up Roger taking out his guilt on David. But when Roger gets defensive about, well, what do I have to be guilty about? She won't explain or take it any further. And
she just backpedals and
Roger says he has no guilt. Liz goes on to say that, well, the family has to stick together, and I think I've proven that to you, which seems to be a clear allusion to, I know you framed Burke Devlin for manslaughter, but I didn't say anything about it then, so you're going to keep quiet about this.
I know what you did last summer, Roger. Last summer, 10 years ago.
And Liz insists that they keep David at home. And there's a knock at the door, which Liz answers to let Sheriff Glasses in. And she pulls a face like, oh shit, the fuzz.
Flush the...
No. Yeah. He's come to show them something. And he starts to reveal his theory about David. And Roger admits, like, oh yeah, it wasn't Burke. We thought it was, but it wasn't. And good on you for figuring that out. But Liz cuts him off and shuts him up, and she explains that, oh, no need for any of this. Here's the valve. We found it on the road. The accident was really an accident, and that's all there is to that. Matthew confirmed that the valve had previously been faulty, and he lied about it so he wouldn't be embarrassed and look like he was doing a bad job, so she's throwing him under the bus.
Roger looks like he's chewing tacks the entire time. He's just like, oh my God, this woman, and she is talking very quickly and is not letting Roger get a word in edgewise about it.
And sums up with like, and so it was just an accident, so drop the case, nothing to see here. You won't be investigating any further, right? And the sheriff, kind of defeated, is like, well, I mean, I guess I won't.
Oh, actually, I didn't feel like he was defeated at all. I felt like he kind of got the message and was just a little like, okay, yeah, no, you're good. I didn't want to have to try to lock this kid up. Also, I get the feeling that Glasses Sheriff also kind of hates Roger. And,
well, I mean, he does tromp around town yelling at him about how he's doing his job wrong.
Sure, and Roger just keeps scathingly looking at Liz, and as Sheriff is leaving, he says, okay, well, I guess we're going to drop the case, and then he pointedly looks at Roger and says, and Roger, give your son my regards. And that was why I felt like, oh yeah, he totally knows that that little shit tried to kill Roger. And he's kind of like, and I hope he
Sorry that he
does.
failed. Yeah. Well, at this, Liz scowls in triumph at Roger, like, see, we did it my way. And he scowls back at her, then creeps upstairs. But she shouts after him that she had no choice. And she defends her lies, saying that she had to protect David. Roger warns that she's protected a monster and she will live to regret it. And then he continues upstairs as the score intensifies and Liz is left alone in the foyer. End credits.
Episode 33, Victoria Winters says it feels like years since she's been at Collinwood. And I'm like, girl, same, but it's been like 4 or 5 days. The days have passed, but just 5 of them. Also, Liz is a shut-in.
And she's still looking for answers and thinks that maybe Liz has them. To underscore this, we cut to Liz sitting creepily in the dark in the drawing room as Carolyn comes in and turns on a light. Carolyn is worried about her, and Liz says she's fine, but kind of weird and vacantly. And she just says, oh, I was waiting up for you, or whatever.
She looks like she did not, in fact, flush the Quaaludes when the fuzz came.
Perhaps this was in a particularly pilly era, and
Yeah.
they are rich. So Carolyn asks after David, but Liz isn't really listening and says, oh, Carolyn, I want at least you to be happy, I guess, like no matter whatever happens to the rest of us crazy bastards. Opening credits. We come back to Liz and Carolyn reviewing the events of the evening. Carolyn's ears perk up and she gets excited when she learns that Burke has been to the house. She's like, oh, did you see him?
You saw him? What is he wearing?
Carolyn asks Liz to confirm that she now knows and agrees that David was responsible for the tampering, and she does. Liz wants to know if anybody in town knows what's going on. Carolyn says no, and Liz makes clear, like, okay, we're covering it up. Don't tell anybody.
Carolyn says, well, it's over now, and Liz says it feels like it will go on and on.
But Carolyn does say that, well, shouldn't we apologize to Burke since we've all been running around town accusing him? Liz says no, her responsibility is to David, and Carolyn should feel that way too. Carolyn says she would rather have one friend like Burke than 10 cousins like that little monster David. Then she offers to make tea. Liz warns her not to trust Burke, and just because he didn't do this nefarious thing doesn't mean he's not going to do some other nefarious thing.
Which, fair. I mean, he did have a private detective and is skulking about and flirting with every woman in town and asking questions.
And a couple of the men.
Well, yes, that's true.
Carolyn changes the subject to say that she just isn't ready to marry Joe and that she needs to find herself or whatever. Speaking of Joe, he is absolutely shit-faced at the Blue Whale talking to himself.
He is proposing to his beer, and the beer is also not willing to marry him.
The actor's performance of Sloppy Drunk is adorable.
Yes.
It is very cute.
Have been not on the fence about Joe, but I just haven't been hot for Joe like you're hot for Joe. I am now adding him to the list of every character that I am hot for. He was precious.
Well, back off, bitch. I saw him first. He's mine.
Well, I mean, okay, I still have Maggie and Liz
and Roger Burke. And Burke and Carolyn. And
no, I'm not. No. I'm not attracted to Carolyn or Vicky, but I am kind of hot for Maggie with the good hair and Liz, and sometimes evil Roger, like if I'm in a certain mood. Anyway.
Okay, now that Joe, we've cleared that up.
Yes, inquiring minds needed to know.
Joe is drunk and feeling sorry for himself that Carolyn won't marry him, and Burke arrives and orders Joe another drink. Joe is a dick, and I appreciated that Joe says the whole world is ending as the Blue Whale jukebox song that is a knockoff of Don't They Know It's the End of the World starts playing.
Yes. During this scene, Matthew and I were on a Harvey Keitel hunt.
Yes, this is the episode where Harvey Keitel, a young, hot Harvey Keitel, a young, hot, rat-faced Harvey Keitel, appears as an uncredited extra at the Blue Whale. We didn't see him this time, but he'll turn up later.
But we were Harvey Keitel spotting.
Joe accuses Burke of trying to steal Carolyn, and Burke denies being interested in doing so. Burke suggests that maybe Joe ought not to drink anymore.
Joe does not like that.
And Joe goes on to tell Burke all the ways in which he doesn't like him. And I don't like your face, or your voice, or your shoes, or the fact that you want to fuck my girlfriend. Well, not really, but she clearly wants to fuck you. And you're a girl stealer, which was cute and
Yes.
elementary school sounding.
I will say that, again, during this performance of him drunk, I realized how much he bears a little bit of a physical resemblance, but his countenance and cadence in speaking reminds me of a very young James Stewart or Jimmy Stewart. Yes.
Joe reveals that the guy who was going to go into business with him and buy a boat is punking out because his wife is going to have a baby, and that's why Joe has tied one on.
And he just keeps going, she's going to have a baby.
And at this point, Burke repeats his offer to pay him to spy on the Collinses for him.
Then Burke says some wise words of wisdom, which are sometimes marriage isn't always the answer. Sometimes it gets in the way, which preach, Burke.
A lesson our dear Rebecca could do well to learn.
Yes, Mama gets married and married and married and never gets carried away. We all know this. Mirroring that conversation at the Blue Whale back at Collinwood.
Carolyn asks Liz why she ought to get married. She insists that she's got lots of time and there shouldn't be any rush, but Liz says she wants her married and out of the house as soon as possible. But Carolyn is worried about Liz being alone because obviously David is going to go away now, and that means they won't need Vicky anymore, and so Liz will just be all by herself.
Liz says that David isn't going anywhere, and to that, Carolyn is like, what?
Liz also lies and says Roger is in full agreement with her that David should stay.
Well, Roger is in full agreement if he knows what's good for him.
Carolyn naturally is worried about their safety with a little attempted murderer running around.
Yeah, she's kind of like, you're trying to get rid of me and marry me off, but you'll keep the little murder baby around.
And Liz is like, but he's my nephew and family and blah, blah, blah. And Carolyn's like, well, I'm sure Jack the Ripper had an aunt or uncle somewhere, and that was very funny.
Yeah, that was good.
Liz leans in and is like, well, if you're scared, then you really should go. But
Yeah.
David needs me and you don't need me anymore.
Yeah, she sort of changed tactics at that point and was like, well.
Yeah, he is scary.
He is scary,
Shouldn't
isn't he?
you
Get the
leave?
fuck out of here. Go get married.
Upstairs, Vicky reads her crumpled orphan basket letter in bed, as I imagine she does most nights.
Crumpled orphan basket is what they call my vagina. I know that bit's getting old, but I might just keep. That's also what they call my vagina.
That's what they say about your
That's
vagina.
what they say about my vagina.
Yes.
Yeah.
Carolyn interrupts to tell her that dinner is in half an hour, but really she just wants to gossip about the events of the night. So
Yes.
Carolyn asks Vicky, what does she think about the family now that she's been here a while? Aren't they crazy? And Vicky says, no, of course not. But then Carolyn goes on to itemize how weird they all are. But she's also sending weird mixed signals like, you should get out of here. We're all crazy, but also don't leave. I'll be so sad if you leave.
Yes.
And Vicky's just like, hey, you think I could borrow your car? And Carolyn agrees, not knowing what strife that favor will bring later on.
Yes, before I saw what came later on, my note was Vicky asks if she can borrow the car and she's got something to do in town. I'm sure Carolyn wouldn't have said yes had she known that something that she had to do in town was, in fact, Sexy Burke Devlin.
Indeed. Carolyn goes on about how Liz wants her to marry Joe, but now she thinks she's too good for him. Back at the Blue Whale, Joe continues his drunken pity party. Burke is still trying to cut him off. Joe is still being adorable and gathers his resolve and decides to storm Collinwood and let them know what he thinks about all of them. And this is where we do see, briefly, Harvey Keitel dancing seductively at Burke as he's sitting by himself. It was fun.
Yes.
At Collinwood in the foyer, Joe bangs on the door and comes in a drunk mess, demanding to see Carolyn, and Vicky and Liz make very hilarious faces.
They do. He asks if they've locked her up in the dungeon. Liz tells him if he can still drive, he should leave, and it's clear he should not be driving.
And at this point, we had to take a break to Google drunk driving laws in Maine in the 60s. Because at first I thought, well, in 1966 it was probably legal to drive drunk, but in fact it was not. What we learned from our Google is that in the 60s, Maine did have drunk driving laws. It was illegal to drive under the influence, but those laws were rarely enforced. And in Maine specifically, the blood alcohol content limit at the time was around 0.15%, which is double today's
Oh golly, yeah,
standard.
that's a lot.
So sort of it was more legal then. You could be twice as drunk and drive in 1966 than you can now. Thus concludes Legal Corner.
Yes.
Joe is drunk and being obnoxious and still adorable.
He calls everyone to the drawing room, but he calls it the council room.
Well, first Carolyn comes down and is clearly amused that he's there and drunk.
She's like, oh, you're blotto or whatever.
She's grinning and like, well, this ought to be good. And then he ushers them all into the drawing room where he accuses Liz of ruining Carolyn by keeping her shut up in that creepy dungeon house, and that Carolyn will never marry him because she's just going to stay in her dungeon keeping her old mother company. And he talks shit about Liz being a weird hermit and that Carolyn won't get married because she saw what effect it had on Liz. Liz is clearly pissed off, but they make Joe sit down and he does and promptly passes out. Carolyn tries to tell Liz that what Joe said isn't true, but Liz is making a real good, sad stank face about it.
Liz then stares into the foreground with tears in her eyes, and Vicky gets the fuck out with Carolyn's car and
Which
goes.
she has been trying to do the whole time.
Yes.
As soon as Joe starts making a scene, Vicky's like, I don't really need to be here. I'm not involved in all this.
Yeah.
But he insists.
She goes to join Burke and Harvey Keitel, who we see again at the Blue Whale, and Burke looks pleased to see her.
End credits. Episode 34, Victoria Winters, reminds us that yes, it's still creepy at Collinwood and she's still searching for answers, mysterious past, blah blah blah. At the Blue Whale, Burke is grinning at Vicky across the table and he's flirting. She is cold and just wants the detective's report. Opening credits.
He is hoping she wanted to join him for dinner and because she's hot for him, but she just wants to use him for his bitch detective.
And they are toasting and talking about drinks and loose metaphors of ladies as drinks, which
Sure.
something about how Carolyn thinks she's something harder, but really she's just a soda, and
Liz is sherry.
and Vicky is either a chocolate malt or champagne, whatever all of that means.
Anyway, he keeps trying to be kind of romantic and she keeps pressing about her past.
Burke suggests they order dinner, but Vicky is not hungry. She just wants the report.
And he says that the report is in his hotel room, and
thinking that will dissuade her.
And she's like, well, if the report's in the hotel room, then the hotel room is where we'll go. And it's kind of like, well, I guess I'm, in it. So.
Sure, and he's surprised that she isn't more concerned with propriety and is willing to be seen going to a strange man's hotel room in the night. At Collinwood, Joe is still passed out on the sofa and he wakes up to a blurry Carolyn teasingly offering him champagne and teasing him about his hangover. She asks how his head is, and I would wager that he has not had any complaints. She teases him for showing up drunk. She insists on bringing him coffee. He's asking if he did anything foolish, and she says that he's made an enemy, and she says, oh, or he says, oh, really? Who? And she's like, me. She explains a bit about what happened. Joe says, I think I'll kill myself, and she says, finish that coffee first, and that's cute.
Yeah.
He apologizes and she's being kind of a good sport about it. He explains about the boat and how he was feeling sorry for himself because this business opportunity fell through, and Carolyn is being supportive. Back at the inn, Burke and Vicky enter his room. He offers to order room service, but again, she just wants to read the report and he thinks this is a date. She keeps insisting it is not. He continues to flirt. She changes the subject and asks why he had her investigated in the first place. She's not anybody. She's never met any of these people before. He explains he's just interested in the Collins family, and since she was going to work there, he wanted to know about her. Back in the drawing room at Collinwood, Carolyn serves Joe coffee and a sandwich while he's looking at a portrait of her grandfather.
And she's like, it's okay. He was a big drunk too.
And he says, you still love me, don't you? And she won't take the bait and just says, shut up and eat the sandwich. Carolyn does ask that Joe apologize to Burke for being a dick. He is not down for that. Carolyn explains that Burke didn't actually try and kill Roger, and she does tell the lie that it was just an accident. And she avoids the subject of Burke when he's like, why are you so interested in Burke? She kisses him to shut him up, and that's always fun. She does ask him again to apologize to Burke.
And he says he won't. He says he doesn't like him or trust him, and that we can just leave it at that. And they do.
Back at the inn, Burke is ordering dinner on the phone as Vicky finishes reading the report. She lets him know that it doesn't contain anything that she doesn't already know, and Burke pries a little bit and offers to help in any way he can. She is suspicious, so he just flirts harder, and she is clearly uncomfortable. She says that she doesn't want to be put in the middle of his drama with Roger, so he flirts even harder. So she goes on to explain her sad origin story and all about the basket and the mysterious Bangor money and the anonymous donor story.
While she's talking, he's in the background listening, and he has a look of falling in love.
Oh, does he?
I think so. At least that's how I would like Burke Devlin to look at me if he were falling in love with me.
I didn't notice, but Burke warns of unpleasant things about to happen at Collinwood, and is she really sure she needs to pursue this right now? She says that yes, she does, so he says he will help. They're interrupted by a knock at the door, which they expect to be dinner, but surprise, it's Joe. Joe had forgot to pay for his drinks when he storms out, and when he went to the bar, he found out Burke had paid for him, so he doesn't want to owe Burke anything, so he's come to bring him the $8 and change or whatever, which sounds like a fortune in drinks in 1966 money.
Yeah, it's like a $80 bar tab.
So he was really very drunk.
Yes.
And Joe and Vicky are kind of shocked to see one another, but they don't really address it. Joe just gives Burke the money and leaves. Vicky then leaves without having dinner, and Burke is clearly disappointed. She does throw him a little bone and give him a smile and a rain check on dinner, and that's the end. Episode 35. Victoria Winters reminds us that Collinwood is creepy and smells like fear and hatred as creepy little David is creeping down the stairs like he does. He hides on the stairs as Carolyn comes into the foyer to answer the phone. She goes into the drawing room to take the call, so David picks up the extension that she didn't hang up so he can listen in. Joe is calling to tell Carolyn that he paid Burke back but did not apologize to him, but also.
Girl, Vicky was there.
And so I guess I'm not worried about you and Burke because I guess he and Vicky are boning and Carolyn is pissed.
Obviously furious,
Like,
just little steam coming off her blonde head.
Joe tries again to get Carolyn to tell him that she loves him. She will not, and she ends the call, then catches David having been listening in the foyer, and they tussle a little bit. Opening credits. David creeps after her and at first is apologetic and lies and says he wasn't listening, but then when she's a bitch, he asks where Roger is and she doesn't know and tries to shoo him away. So David is stirring shit and it's pretty funny. He, when asked to leave her alone, reveals that he was listening and accuses her of liking Burke and being mad that Vicky was having dinner with him. And
then David is trying to use his manipulation tactics to turn Carolyn against Vicky.
And he says that Vicky knows that Carolyn likes Burke, and that's probably the only reason she's having dinner with him, just to make you mad.
And then Carolyn actually screams at him, like not regular TV mad scream, like get out of here. And it was pretty great. And he does in fact run off.
At the restaurant, oh my god, it's here, it's here. New Sam enters and visits with Joe. They commiserate about hangovers because remember, Sam is an old drunk. He's there looking for Maggie. Maggie is elsewhere, so Joe asks, how many times did Sam have to propose to his wife before she agreed to it? Sam says, oh, I didn't. She proposed to me. So Joe is like, oh, must be nice to have a girl that likes you.
Yeah.
So Sam goes up to see Burke, and as he leaves, Joe warns, like, make sure to knock. He's fucking Vicky in there. He just says, be sure to knock, but we know what he means.
Sure.
So upstairs, Sam does knock, and Burke is annoyed at more surprise company because everybody just seems to invite themselves to his room.
He's just trying to eat his 2 dinners.
He invites Sam to join him for dinner since he has extras, but Sam declines and they just chat. Sam wants to know if that second extra steak was intended for Carolyn, and Sam is there to try and get out of painting the portrait that they agreed to. He tries to say he doesn't have the time and he has an offer of some ad work in Boston, was it?
Boston or Brooklyn, but I'm pretty sure it was Boston.
Okay. He further explains that he hasn't painted a portrait in a while, so he's kind of rusty, and Burke is offering a lot of money and probably wouldn't be pleased. But Burke is insistent. Sam is surprised to learn that Burke had nothing to do with Roger's accident. At that point, Sam asks for a drink, and Burke is just kind of confused. At Collinwood, Carolyn is exiting the drawing room to stare at the chiming clock in the foyer as Vicky returns, and Carolyn is a bitch from
Catfight!
She demands her car keys back, and Vicky thanks her and asks if there's anything left from dinner because she's hungry. So Carolyn's like, didn't Burke feed you well enough? And storms off. And David creeps out of the shadows to reveal he was eavesdropping.
Vicky tries to talk to her rationally, and Carolyn says she's not jealous, but clearly is, and says she's surprised.
And Vicky is like,
since Vicky didn't trust him.
Vicky straight up asks, are you mad that I saw Burke? And then Carolyn gets mad, like, what? Do you think I'm jealous? And Vicky's like, yeah,
yes.
And you have a boyfriend, whore.
Right.
Vicky calls her an idiot for being mad. Then Carolyn makes a sad face while Vicky tries to explain, but Carolyn is irrational and bitchy, and she throws a magazine dramatically and makes a great face, and Vicky just leaves. Back at the inn, Sam starts to excuse himself. Burke wants to know why Sam doesn't want to paint him like one of his French girls. Didn't you make that joke earlier?
Maybe.
Burke suspects Roger is trying to prevent it. Sam denies that, saying, like, why would Roger care? And Burke teases at the fact that Sam clearly knows something about Roger and the manslaughtering. So, to get around this and not confirm these suspicions, Sam eventually is like, sure, I'll do it, whatever.
Well, Burke also offers him more money, and boring new Sam downs a glass of whatever he's drinking and says, sure, I'll do it. I don't like the new Sam.
You're not going to be bored by new Sam in a minute. Back in the restaurant, Joe is still there, and new Sam returns looking for Maggie. They talk again about Joe's girl trouble. Back at Collinwood, Carolyn is still pissy, but invites Vicky into the drawing room to chat. She apologizes, but is obviously still mad. She admits to being jealous and kind of explains her personality disorder to Vicky a little bit and is like, I don't even want Burke all that much, but I want everything, and it's all
I
about
just have
me
to
all
grab
the
what I
time.
can, grab it all, it's all mine.
And Vicky is just like, snap out of it, you silly goose, and kind of teases her a little bit. And
Yeah.
I thought Vicky and Carolyn have more chemistry than Vicky and Burke, or Carolyn and Burke, or Carolyn and Joe. I thought this was the most romantic scene we've had so far in 30 or 35 episodes.
So I actually don't read that with them. Like, they do have a good camaraderie, but it feels sisterly.
Well, perhaps we just think that because we know that they're half sisters, but
Sure, like that could be that. I guess if you were to read it completely.
it seemed romantic in this scene, I thought. Carolyn repeats that she doesn't want Vicky to leave, and then Carolyn leaves the room. So Vicky shuts the drawing room doors and makes a face like, geez, what a crazy bitch.
Yeah.
Then she tries to call Burke, but he isn't in and she doesn't leave a message. David enters the drawing room and is being a creep, but Vicky isn't having his shit today and is just like, what do you want? Tell me, or, like.
Get the fuck out.
And he says, you're going to be sorry you ever came here, and runs up the stairs. End credits.
Yes.
Okay, we have completed the recaps. I have a question for you, Rebecca.
Yes, Matthew.
Of all of the cast members, well, first, what do you think about new Sam?
I think that he was kind of boring, and then when he got all very serious and trying to be regular Werner her hot dog Sam, it just was bad. And I preferred the bad overacting of first Sam to the underwhelming presence and then sort of strained excitement of this Sam.
Well, I know we haven't seen new Sam interact all that much with other characters, but just take a guess. If I were to tell you that the actor that plays new Sam were in a romantic relationship with someone else on the show, who do you think it would be?
I would think that it would be potentially Liz or Roger or someone age appropriate, but it is the 1960s, so who knows?
One more guess.
Is it Maggie?
No,
Thank God.
That would be gross. No, it is not. Hang on, I just have to do some quick math to calculate the age difference.
Well, you know, I'm not going to age difference shame too terribly much.
Oh, I think you might. Well, it's actually not that bad. The age difference is only 16 years.
Oh, I have that beat.
But David Ford, who plays New Sam, is the husband of Nancy Barrett, who plays Carolyn. That is Carolyn's husband. Can you believe it?
I cannot, because he's kind of a troll.
She is a hot young blonde, and he looks like a stuffed Ewok toy. He has a little
Sure.
bear face and is old.
I
And
mean, it takes all kinds.
I
But
was shocked when I learned that those two were married.
yeah, I mean, that's wild. I can't really see it, but
I expected you to be more shocked. Maybe I built it up too much.
maybe you did.
Carolyn and New Sam were not married for long. They were only married for 2 years.
Well, that's sad for them, but maybe they found happiness, or maybe they didn't.
Oh, also, fun fact, just looking at Nancy Barrett's Wikipedia, although she comes from Shreveport, most of her early life was spent in Bartlesville, Oklahoma.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's a place you've been.
It is.
Well, I'm disappointed you're not more shocked about New Sam.
Hold on. Let me take it again. What? That's scandalous. Oh my. Yeah, no, sorry. I just wasn't.
Thank you and happy Halloween. See you next week.
Happy Halloween.
Ooh.